Take a look at this clip from MSNBC, and I would appreciate it if you all would listen.
One day, our children's children will read American history. And can you imagine our reading that James Madison or Thomas Jefferson tried to overthrow the government so they could stay in power? That's what we're looking at. We're looking at American history.
Could you imagine if Thomas Jefferson tried to overthrow the government? I am shocked. Everyone knows Thomas Jefferson stood valiantly before the people of this great continent and said, all God save the king, all hail the king, we love the crown, Britain forever. That's exactly the story of the founding fathers. But I just want to add, I love, first of all, how I'm sorry, man. He's talking about the founding fathers quite literally overthrew the government. And but more importantly, he's comparing Donald Trump to the founding fathers who overthrew a tyrant for the people and established this great nation. They succeeded. It's kind of a weird perspective. It's like you're comparing Trump to the founding fathers right there. It's kind of like, okay, well, that's like a weird thing to do because people like them. Mm-hmm. And then being like, to overthrow the government, I'm like, yeah, they succeeded at doing that.
So he's obviously, in his defense, he's talking about if by 1811, Thomas Jefferson was still, or 1806 or whatever, he was still refusing to let go of power and was like, we are going to be the new monarchy. And so he's referring to that.
Because absolutely not.
That's what Napoleon did.
Absolutely not.
He's talking about
Ian,
what if Thomas Jefferson pulled a Napoleon.
You are fabricating context to defend someone for no reason.
If you think that Al Sharpton doesn't know that Thomas Jefferson was involved in the American Revolution,
the thing is, Al Sharpton is not an actual effective thought leader. He is the equivalent of a political ambulance chaser, right? He shows up to do a couple hits, to fundraise, and to make himself feel good. He's not a reliable source for anything. So the fact that this is who they're triaging with should tell you that he has no idea what he's talking about, and they are grasping at straws.
And I'm not saying he did not know they were involved in the revolution. I'm taking his statement as it is. I'm establishing no alternative context like you are doing. The man compared Donald Trump to founding fathers who overthrew the government, succeeded to remove a tyrant.
I mean, Thomas Jefferson literally wrote the document that said, this is why we are overthrowing you. This is why we're justified. This is why we have no other recourse. We are now in charge. We're severing the political bonds.
The Declaration of Independence was them literally saying, you have no authority anymore. We're in charge now.
Well, I'm steel manning his argument for now. It's funny. We can laugh at the guy and be like, dumb idiot. You didn't know. But like, obviously he's talking about if Thomas Jefferson had overthrown the American government.
That makes no sense. There's no context in what he said to assume he's talking about 1811 or anything after.
Why would you think he's talking about King George? That Thomas Jefferson didn't overthrow King George?
Because I think when you invoke the founding fathers, the obvious example is, yes, they overthrew a government. They overthrew the British government.
But they didn't overthrow our government.
Sure, it was our government at the time. At the time, before they overthrew it, it was our government.
Not to mention the critical race theory argument is that the founding fathers were wealthy white slave owners who didn't want to pay taxes. So in order to maintain their status and power, overthrew the government. Like the point is, it is a stupid thing to say.
I agree with that.
But I stand by it. It's Al Sharpton. You can't expect anything better.
What's funny is MSNBC, did they push back on this at all? Or were they just No,
they're like, Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you for blessing us with your presence here today. We're so grateful.
I just love how we phrase it. Can you imagine? Like, let me get my crystal ball. Yes, I can imagine. It would be first a declaration and then a revolution and then a free country, the greatest the world has ever known.
To be fair,
I can actually imagine.
To be fair, it was a revolution, then a declaration.
And the French Revolution went haywire. They started a revolution. It looked pretty good. And then they wouldn't let go of the power. Robespierre went insane, completely egomaniacal, and then they started killing each other, and then Napoleon seized it.
But you know why that is.
To be fair, Robespierre was always insane.
In the beginning, he was really lovable. He was like a brilliant orator. He was a lawyer. Everyone liked him. He was the most level-headed of all of them. And then something happened.
But I learned an important lesson from Occupy Wall Street, because I knew some of these far leftists, and they fought for free speech in 2011. And then when it came to the free speech arguments in 2018 and 19, I asked these guys, like this one guy I knew, I was like, how could you be for free speech back then and all of a sudden your opinion changed? And he laughed and said, because you're too stupid. You didn't realize we were using you. We hate liberals. When you defended our speech, it empowered us. And now we want to take yours away from you because we want power. And I was like, oh, it makes sense.
Also, you know what we were talking about just before we went on air? We were talking about libertarianism versus a more ordered liberty, like a recognition of moral order. That's the biggest difference between the French Revolution and the American Revolution. The American Revolution was based, I know this is really historically nerdy, was based on this idea that there was some fundamental objective truth that we didn't just determine as populism, right? And the French Revolution chose libertarianism instead. So we ordered our constitution on original justice, which is like Judeo-Christian values, and the French Revolution didn't. They ordered it as freedom as the ultimate end, whereas we viewed freedom as the means to something greater.
And I think one of the big differences, a catalyst, and one of the principal catalysts for the French Revolution was economics. People were starving, there was famine, and so you had all these French people being like, don't know, don't care, I'm angry. And that just led to beheadings and other chaos. Whereas in the United States, it was consistent oppressive actions by the crown and things like no representation in government. And the founding fathers and many of the state leaders would repeatedly petition the crown for things that made more sense on our behalf. And they would just say, no, screw off over and over again. So the revolutionary period was actually about 20 years long. And the Declaration of Independence was way later on in that whole period.
That's an interesting point about the secularism of the French Revolution. It's interesting. I haven't really thought much about it, but that the American Revolution was like I don't know if it's a Christian revolution. They put God in a lot of their writings. Then the French Revolution was all about like do away with the old God, create a new religion, create a new calendar. You know, we don't want to adhere to these old traditions.
I saw an interesting video where some conservative dude was doing one of those gotcha videos of stupid people in Times Square. And he asked, what year did America gain its independence? And I thought that question was really, really funny because even he did not know the answer. Because what year was it? Anybody have a guess?
1781.
Are you talking about technically? Because, I mean, if you want to be real philosophical about this, you could argue that in some ways where it's a continuous battle that's ongoing forever.
2023, biatch!
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a lame answer. But
I actually don't know the year.
Are you talking about like when the Constitution, when the Revolution ended?
The surrender of Cornwallis.
Was that 81? Did they fight?
Yeah,
all the way
81.
into 81
at Yorktown. So that was no, wait, that's the wrong one. 1781.
So they announced it in 76.
So you can make the argument that we had our independence in 1776, but I disagree. Declaring it didn't change the fact the crown asserted their right and started shooting at the Americans to and actually controlled a bunch of cities and occupied places. So we did not have it. It wasn't until Cornwallis surrendered that we actually gained it. So 1781. But I think it's funny because they're like, what year was it? And it's supposed to be 1776. And it's like, no, actually, that's when, they started sending in the troops.
Right.
Granted, they were already sending in the troops, to be fair, and that's kind of a catalyst for it. But
I think what happened right after is what's interesting because we didn't have the Constitution for a while after, right? We had the Articles of Confederation, and that was structured on more of a libertarian basis, and it resulted in chaos. And they realized that we couldn't order a society along those lines, so we had to use the Constitution to reorder it along James Madison's viewpoints, which were more ordered liberty.
And I think there is something to be said for the question of, people think it's 1776 because they think when you declared that you were independent, you had independence because you have awoken to this
claimed
concept.
it in a
You
sense.
claimed it, you're aware that you want these things, but I think it is important to underscore that you actually had to fight for it. And to your point, you have to keep this going, right? You concede ground at
a
any point and
republic
lose
if you
liberty.
can keep it.
Yeah.
to be fair, I was even wrong about that. The American Revolution officially ended September 3rd, 1783 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris.
Officially, okay. Cornwallis surrendered in 81.
Cornwallis' surrender in 81 ended any chance of the British actually being able to win a war. And so from that point on, there was still conflict and occupation, but then the treaty was signed in 1783. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like, the American Revolution took place over 20 some odd years. You could have been born a couple of years after the start of this period and then fought in the war. Like your whole life was hearing about all this revolutionary stuff.
I mean, that's true of anyone who deployed to Afghanistan, right? I knew people who were in kindergarten.
Born after.
Some people were born after 9/11 and ended up serving in Afghanistan. So these things happen.
Yeah, that's trippy.
It is trippy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes me so mad, the Afghanistan stuff. Because I have been thinking a lot about the draft. We talked about the draft a few days ago and how there was people were talking about it, and it's like the military numbers aren't doing very well because they sent us into that occupying war in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and then Iraq and Libya. We conquered Iraq, and then we conquered Libya. And people are getting pissed off that Russia wants to conquer a trade port right on its border. Like, you fucking kidding me? We took Libya. We're in control of Libya right now. We own Libya. Like, it's the grossest shit. And I mean, we need to inspire our military. That's what bothers me is that there's demoralization in the military.
I don't think we own Libya.
I mean, we basically
think we
run that
destroyed
show.
it.
Yeah.
And now there's a slave trade.
Set up Osprey Global. Did we set up Sidney Blumenthal's Osprey Global Solutions there?
Libya for a
running
while
guns?
has been ruled by like random warring tribes since the fall of Gaddafi.
Yeah, it's basically an American puppet state at the
My
moment.
problem wasn't that we went into Afghanistan. I think that was perfectly morally justified after we had been attacked on 9/11. My problem was how they handled it. Like, you go into a war, you have terms of engagement that allow our fighting men and women to win, and you actually have a plan for victory, and you have an objective that is victory. Like, you get in, you do your thing, you get out. Like, don't drag it on forever.
There was no reason to go into Afghanistan. If the argument is that we should have gone to Afghanistan because some of the 9/11 hijackers were Afghani, it's like, what about Egypt?
Well, the Taliban?
Yeah, but what about Egypt or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia? I mean, Saudi Arabia got sued, I think, over 9/11. I'm not going to get into the whole history of that because there's too many gaps in my knowledge, but it wasn't like it was just the Taliban that did it. Osama bin Laden was hiding in Pakistan. There was funding coming from various sources in various Middle Eastern countries. Some of the hijackers were Egyptian. We didn't go and invade those countries.
I don't disagree with that. I think that the Taliban was giving safe passage to Osama bin Laden. So you can go back and make that argument. I'm not, especially against Saudi Arabia. I think that they were certainly not held accountable because they were a territorial ally, if you will.
I think part of the problem,
I do think
15 were citizens of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
2 were from the Emirates. 1 was from Egypt and 1 was from Lebanon. Most of them were from Saudi Arabia, and we're just like, nah, that's cool. Saudi's like, we're all right with you.
I think part of the problem is that war that we pretended wasn't a war, but obviously was a war, never ended, right? Like,
Right.
I can tell you people born after it deployed to Afghanistan, but then the Biden administration said, we want to pull out on September 11th to have some symbolic win for our administration. And we all saw how that went. Like, there is something fundamentally wrong. And I think to your point, you know, I have family members and I know people who are part of the military, and there is an energy of discouragement, but also I don't think our culture knows totally how to handle our military, right? I mean, I think a lot of us are anti-war, and I think that's probably good. On the other hand, where do you put in people who go into military service for honorable reasons? How do you reconcile both things at once?
I'd like to build solar-powered water condensation all over the planet. Like, if we could have peacekeeping missions with our troops and our military and actually
I feel like peacekeeping missions is like actually something else. We call it peacekeeping, but it's usually not that.
That's what they called them in Vietnam, you know.
This is cool.
Advisors.
What they do is they build these, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but they have these big white plastic or some, you know, carbon structures that are flat up top and then slowly, as they get lower, become rounded and funneled. And what happens is the condensation sticks to it and the water pours down and it fills up fresh water by the morning.
You can actually have them go
Science is
underground.
crazy.
So the air goes down underground and cools
Condenses.
way down underground. And then you can have like
crazy.
solar panels down, or like heating panels or cooling panels underground that are connected to the solar up top. So it super cools the gas underground. You get a lot of water.
That's cool
with that.
stuff. The reason I like to elaborate on the idea is because there are really awesome stuff we could be doing, but instead we just seem to be blowing people up all over the world. That's what our money's good for.
they just
Or gender
developed
studies in Pakistan.
LK99, that's room temperature superconductor. Did you guys hear about that? It's going to change the entire computing industry. I mean,
The computing industry, bro, you have no
potentially.
idea.
Dude, I have no idea. It's like I'm
That's why no one believes
standing
it.
on the precipice.
I love science, I have to say. I feel like I come on this show and you guys teach me so much.
Most superconductors where you can pass a lot of electricity through without losing it, they need to be really cold. But these can be done at near room temperature, apparently. Proposed ambient pressure.
The claim is,
and they're being reproduced.
Superconductors, zero resistance, transfer of electricity. We lose energy as it's transferred around. There's heat loss, there's a bunch of loss. With a superconductor, you don't have that. There's a lot of things you can do. They do superconductor levitation. They'd be able to do like maglev trains on the cheap. It would completely change computing. It would completely change batteries. It would, what people are claiming is that it will make the world like a sci-fi reality. Like, this is a major breakthrough on par with the discovery of the charged electromagnetic spectrum. Yeah. And because such, nobody believes it. Yeah. And they're waiting for replication because room temperature superconductors is going to it's going to be like sci-fi.
I've heard that they're replicating it now. And this with like deep fakes and with obviously the internet, all these weird technologies of like, I'm really going to be able to imagine something and then see it like with the neural net. We're entering
in your
like another
lifetime. I think that's the craziest things. These revolutions in technologies, evolutions of technology, I should say, are happening faster than ever before.
So my thought is that we're going to evolve into another species. But what do you think, Liz? Like,
Would you get a brain chip?
No,
not right away.
never.
Elon said that he would get one.
I
hope he has a great time. No, thank you.
if most people will get it.
If I see like hundreds of thousands of young people in high school getting it and just like blowing test scores out of the water, learning a bunch of languages, becoming really good at athletics, I would consider it. But I would rather have something non-invasive like a helmet or something.
Like, so you like the augmented reality glasses?
I like
Do you know
them.
anybody who doesn't have a cell phone?
Yeah.
How many people do you know don't have cell phones?
Like 5, because I know people who live off the grid.
Right.
I don't
And,
know anybody that doesn't have a cell phone after like older than high school.
in the mountains of West Virginia.
Are cell phones CIA tracking devices?
Oh, certainly all your information is tracked by any intelligence agency around the world who wants it.
So conservatives know full well the deep state is tracking literally everything they do, every website they go to, every picture they look at, every naughty thing they do on the internet, and they don't care. And they would then say, well, I'm not getting the brain chip. And it's like, oh, please, dude, 10 years, you'll all be chipped.
Here's where I think it's different. Because when what's Apple's thing that's coming out, that augmented reality goggles that he just announced a couple months ago?
I know what you're talking about.
There was an engineer
Vision or
that
whatever.
worked on that who did a thread on Twitter right after it was announced, who said, I worked on part of this as it was going. I don't work there anymore. A lot of it's under NDA. And he was bragging. He was proud of having worked on it. He was talking about how what they wanted to teach it to do was anticipate what you want so that it could offer you things as you're going. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound cool to me. That sounds like the ability to manipulate. Because if you get used to them anticipating, then they could plant ideas that are just like, that could control your movements. I think that's very different than a cell phone because it's not integrated into your consciousness. Even like I have my cell phone in my hand all the time, obviously. Like we're all obsessed with it. But it's not part of my decision-making process because it hasn't been merged with my consciousness. Like that's really freaky.
Also, you could discipline yourself to go without your cell phone.
So the one fair point I'll make is there's a difference between holding something in your hand and having a surgery, right? A lot of people don't want to do surgery, but cell phones changed everything. Before we had the iPhone, if you wanted to go on the internet, it was you'd go out and hang out with your friends, then be like, when you get home, I'll see what's happening online. Then you'd go out and hang out with your friends, then come home. Once the iPhone came out and people had, this was like the expansion, the explosion into 24/7 web. Now you were on Facebook nonstop all day, every day. A dramatic difference.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
So our consciousness has merged with the internet at this point. Your phone is always with you. And now look, I'm wearing this smartwatch that vibrates when someone tweets at me.
I think the weird thing
it doesn't actually do that because I block that. But like I get text messages and
your
it's like,
watch is just like constantly going off.
Right.
No, I think part of it is you'll start to see a separation of societies, right? Like you asked me, who do I know who doesn't have cell phones? And like they are all off the grid mountain people who chose to live that way and know they're going without some modern conveniences for that reason. I think, like you're a young parent. There will be parents who opt to give their kid an Instagram profile and an iPad really early on. And then there will be parents who say, I'm going to hold out for as long as I possibly can. I think you will see a clear difference in these things. And maybe we'll have data to say like, hey, these people are benefiting. Here's what's happening because of that. Because again, technology is moving so quickly. We're able to track things better than ever before. On the other hand, I think culturally we'll just split apart. I think we'll have like the mountain people and the tech people.
You mentioned before the show like shared morality, how it's such an important part of a cohesive government. For instance, the United States government had like a shared kind of almost an authoritarian morality to it. But so I see this technology and this augmented reality brain chip lifestyle is like a fast track to a shared morality. They can tell us what we think or they can make us believe a certain thing, and it could be good, could be bad. But like, do you think that it's even possible to get humans to come together and begin to share a new morality without using like this mind meld tech, this internet?
I'm first of all, I didn't say the word authoritarian when it came to
that was me.
That was you. That was you.
Liz disavows.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. I just don't think it's an accurate word to describe what I'm talking about. So, I think that cell phones have connected us in a way, like I'm grateful for my cell phone. I also see like the problems that it has wrought. Like I actually think the point that Tim was making is a good argument for my point. Like TikTok has changed the minds, and I don't mean like changed the thought, like changed the ideological minds. Like it has changed the brains of Gen Z, and not in a good way. This should be an argument for pushing further away from augmented reality, because already just with disattached phones, we've wrecked a generation with that. I think, Ian, your point is a point that I make a lot, that indoctrination is not inherently immoral. It's what's being indoctrinated that determines whether it's good or bad, right? Like our education system right now indoctrinates children in like anti-American, anti-Christian, pro-Marxist values, and that's wrong. But it's not because this school is being used for indoctrination. Indoctrination is morally neutral. We actually should be using the education system for indoctrination. We should just be indoctrinating children in what's good and right and true. We should be indoctrinating them in American civic values and in Christian virtues, even if they're not practicing religious people. Our nation is built, like our entire legal structure is built on Judeo-Christian values, right? You can't murder someone. Why? Because that person's made in the image and likeness of God. Like, that's the only thing that sets us apart from animals. So I think we should be using venues that we have for indoctrination. We just have to be smarter than the left. And when's the last time that you can point to a conservative, a Republican politician, an institution that's actually controlled by the right? The right stopped fighting for those like 50 years ago. So it's just controlled by the left. So yeah, they're forming the minds and the ideologies of all these young people. It's terrible.
But it is changing. With Bud Light, for instance, the news that just came out, they lost $400 million or whatever. There's a big cultural shift. Sound of freedom, obviously. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.